Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X research and professional physicist. And today I'd like to bring to you another one of my articles. This one's entitled Planet X Will Turn Earth into a Superheated Inferno. Now, red clouds seem to have become more and more common on Earth. Scattering is the accepted explanation for the color of clouds. But clouds are Planet X debris, and their increase suggests that more and more Planet X system stellar cores and their debris is coming into the atmosphere, and that it is the fact that they are low in gravitational energy and absorbing energy from the Earth that is resulting in our skies looking more and more red, particularly at sunset and sunrise. And in figure 1 below, you see some red clouds. Although they're not completely red, this cloud seems to be dark gray just above where it is red. It's red at the bottom. This one, you can see parts are red and parts are gray. This one seems to be mainly gray. There's a little tinge of red here and there. This one is bright red. We see some red here and some gray there. So there's a mixture of red and gray there. Now, scattering is the deviation of the path of light without changing its frequency and thus its color. In which case, the red color in the clouds at sunset would be due to only red light from the sun reaching those clouds. So scattering is to explain what's going on with the color in the clouds. There has to be red light hitting the clouds, being deviated or reflected in different directions so that we could see red light coming off those clouds, because the clouds cannot change the frequency of the light. So there would have to be red light illuminating these clouds. But if there is only red light reaching the atmosphere, why hasn't everything turned red? Why do we still see some gray in the clouds? Because if the clouds look gray, then there has to be some blue and some green coming off them as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't look gray. They would all look red, like this one here. Or most of this one looks red, a darker red, still red. So this one could look like that, but it doesn't. It looks gray. And this here looks gray as well. It's not totally red. Now, even the cars would turn dark red, surely, if only red light was reaching the atmosphere. But yet it does not happen. It did not even happen when the sun was still shining, which indicates that this is a completely illogical explanation. Cars and clouds look gray because there is still blue and green frequency light reaching them. So clouds cannot look red because of scattering, and have never been able to look red as a result of scattering. And here you see some red and yellow clouds. This is from Jerusalem. And this kind of sky is quite common nowadays at sunrise and sunset in Jerusalem. And it looks actually like the sky's on fire. Now, certain people insist that the red sky is due to scattering and that the clouds are only reflecting light from the sun, and only red light gets to the atmosphere when the sun is below the horizon. However, these clouds are not just red, they are also yellow. It is impossible for only red light to be reaching these clouds, and yet parts of them are yellow, which shows that they cannot be scattering light. And here's another photograph where you can also see the clouds that these don't actually look red. They look kind of orangey and peach and some pink there. So the brighter light source here is clearly not circular. You can see the outline there. It's not circular. Cannot be the real sun. And we have another one here. And this one is in the foreground. It's in front of these dark blue clouds behind it. And by the way, dark blue clouds are not normal. Clouds are supposed to be white or gray, and there's definitely a bluish tinge to these clouds. And so this one cannot be the sun either, because the sun should be out, the real sun would be outside the real atmosphere. And this one is obviously inside the atmosphere because it's in front of those clouds. It's in front of these pink clouds there too. So this is not the real sun either. So we must likely have two simulators here. Now the snow you can see the snow here looks blue. And if the snow looks blue, that means that the atmosphere is not just being illuminated with red light. There has to be blue light in it as well. So the atmosphere, no matter what colors the simulators are emitting, they cannot explain the color seen in the clouds. Because, well, they may be able to, the blue light that we see on the snow may be able to explain that, but if the sun's lower on the horizon, it's supposed to emit only red light, and we have pink clouds. And pink clouds are a mixture, pink is a mixture of red and blue. So that means that there's blue light coming off these clouds, and there's blue light coming off the snow. So that means that if there was a real sun, it cannot explain what we are seeing. If the simulators are emitting blue light and red light, but the simulators are in front of the clouds anyway, so it still doesn't make any sense. So the color of the snow would suggest that the main frequency of light reaching it is actually blue light, as only that would cause something which usually looks white to now look blue. So if blue light is reaching the snow, how come we have red clouds in the sky? So that again shows you that the color of the clouds cannot be explained by the color that is illuminating the atmosphere from a light source. So clouds are not any particular color, white, gray, or red, because they are scattering light. Something much more complex is occurring. Clouds are absorbing light available in the atmosphere and then emitting light through a different process. Ionization and electron capture. Electrons absorb photons, transmit gravitational energy to the other particles in the atom, and then exit the atom, leaving it ionized. The electrons then settle in the atom, releasing energy as photons as they do so. These emitted photons are what give clouds their color. Clouds look gray when more photons in all colors are absorbed and are emitted. Clouds look red when only a certain energy electron, in other words, a red light electron, is available, which gives causes the clouds to give off red photons and to look red when settling in a water molecule. In other words, electrons that would result in the emission of blue and green photons are not available. Thus, it seems that the light being emitted by materials within the atmosphere depend on energy within electrons at that altitude in the atmosphere. This agrees with what happened with the sun when it was still shining. Visible light was emitted from the surface, ultraviolet from higher altitudes, and X-rays from even higher altitudes, because the electrons at the highest altitudes in the sun's atmosphere had more gravitational energy and thus gave off higher energy photons when settling in an atom. So this illustrates what occurred with the sun. So this would be below the surface of the sun. Just above the surface, there was an area where there were electrons, which we can call visible light electrons, because when they entered a particle, an atom, then as they settled in the energy levels, they gave off photons that were visible light photons. So these, we can call them visible light electrons. Then above that, there was a region in the sun's atmosphere where there were ultraviolet electrons. So when these electrons were absorbed by material in the sun's atmosphere, then this material gave off ultraviolet light or ultraviolet photons. And as we went up a bit more, there was a layer in the atmosphere where there were X-ray electrons. So when these were absorbed, the atoms gave, there were ions that were absorbing these electrons, gave off X-rays or X-ray light or X-ray photons. This also explains why there is more and more ultraviolet light reaching the surface of the Earth. And you may look at Article 204 for details on that. I initially thought that this was due to the sun simulators emitting ultraviolet light, and that may still be happening. But it is also likely that ultraviolet light electrons generated by the Earth are occurring at lower altitudes, in other words, below the ozone layer, resulting in ultraviolet photons being given off when clouds absorb electrons at cloud altitudes. This would then suggest that the Earth's electron energy levels are moving down in altitude, indicating declining gravitational energy in the core. So this must have happened with the sun as well, because as the sun lost energy, then these electron energy levels moved down towards the surface, so that X-rays were given off from a layer that was much closer to the surface of the sun than before, and that caused the corona to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And the same thing will be happening with the Earth, because its energy is being absorbed by the planet X material that keeps coming into its atmosphere. So what would happen is, if we have high energy electrons, which the Earth would usually repel all the way to the ionosphere or above even the thermosphere, these electrons are not getting to that altitude anymore. And so there will be higher energy electrons will be occurring at lower altitudes. The Earth may not even be producing electrons at that energy anymore. The highest, maybe the highest energy X-ray electrons may not, it may not be producing them. I cannot be sure of that, but the electrons that it is producing will be going up to lower altitudes than before. So the electrons that were in the stratosphere before, or above the stratosphere, which may have been electrons that would cause the emission of ultraviolet and X-ray light, or therefore ultraviolet and X-ray electrons, would most likely have moved downwards, so that the electrons in the troposphere now have more energy. So the electrons that were ultraviolet electrons most likely moved below this ozone layer. And so that means that material here is now giving off ultraviolet light. And so this means that the atmosphere close to the surface, which is usually filled with infrared electrons, would start being filled with electrons that have maybe still infrared, but higher energy infrared, and will eventually turn into visible light electrons. And so the surface will start emitting visible light photons. And this would cause the atmosphere to heat up, even with just increased energy infrared electrons at the surface. We would expect the surface of the Earth to warm up. So as this occurs, the surface of the Earth will warm up even more, and the atmosphere will warm up even more as well, because now we have ultraviolet at lower and lower altitudes. So that would mean that the Earth would turn, and its atmosphere and the surface would turn into an inferno like Venus. The Earth would heat up. The time period when the Earth turns into an inferno, when the atmosphere will seem to be on fire, will most likely not last very long, as the Earth will also lose gravitational influence over its own matter as it loses energy and start losing outer layers. But this period, and therefore lose the atmosphere eventually. But before it loses the atmosphere will become an inferno. But this period would last, I'm sure, long enough to destroy all life on the surface. Thus, our increasingly red skies at sunset and sunrise point to more and more low gravitational energy Planet X matter arriving in the Earth's atmosphere, which accelerate the declining gravitational energy state of the Earth's core, which will in turn bring about the end of all life on Earth. So in conclusion, red clouds point to, once again, physics having been hijacked by the powers that be, resulting in illogical explanations such as the process of scattering for natural phenomena on Earth. What is actually happening is that electrons have increasing energy at increasing altitudes, and thus matter gives off higher frequency light at higher altitudes. Thus, as the Earth continues to lose gravitational energy, these electron energy levels will get closer to the surface and create an inferno in the Earth's atmosphere, which will most likely end all life on the surface of the Earth. The red clouds thus serve as a warning as to what will soon take place. And these are the references. This is Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X physicist. Thank you for watching.